Hello and welcome to Free Hit, an FPL podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined by my co-host, Jace. Jace, how was your game week 32?
Game week 32 felt a lot like the Tottenham-Nottingham Forest fixture in that I'm happy we did well, but we could have done better. I ended the game week with 69 points. Nice, right? If you'll recall, a couple weeks ago, that was the target. Someone made fun of me for that on Reddit, but you know, the back of the napkin math is working out, right? So every person on my team returned except for Udogi and Muniz. It's the first time that many people have returned for me, I think, since I've been playing FPL, and I still only got 69 points, and I still barely got a green arrow. So, like I said, I'm happy the arrow's green, but I definitely feel like it could have been better. I mean, I feel like you were kind of in a
Yeah,
similar zone as me, right?
it feels like the pack is very tight right now because halfway through game week 29, I was texting you before the Bournemouth-Luton fixture, like halfway through it when Bournemouth was down 3-0. I had Doughty on a clean sheet. I was like 300K, like pushing top 250K. And then after game week 31, I was 800K very quickly. And then this week on a green arrow, I'm back to like 600K. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it just seems like as much as late in the season, we feel like this is the time to really pay attention to rank. I mean, I've still moved 500,000 spots in the last 2 weeks, which is insane to me, despite what I feel like is a fairly template team. So I totally feel you looking at your team and feeling like everyone's returning. But I think there's just a lot of people kind of around the similar area right now, the active
right.
managers that are within the top million trying to break into that top group.
And we're all trying to differentiate the captain too, right? Like we're bouncing between Son, Saka, Palmer, Salah, Haaland, right? And they're all returning pretty much the exact same, right? Like Salah 8, Palmer 5, Sonny 5, Saka somehow got 10, which still that math does not add up to me from the BPS because he had the fucking penalty and that's it. And he didn't do anything else that game. So whatever. Haaland with 8, Darwin with 5. So everybody's kind of seems like they're doing the slow churn, which makes it a bit difficult to gain a lot of rank unless you captained Palmer last week, in which case you made a pretty good stride, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I feel like the template midfield is returning very consistently. Everybody has Salah, Saka, Son, Palmer. It's kind of like, what are you doing in defense, probably, and what are you doing with your
Yeah.
captaincy pick? That's really setting people apart. I did want to check in. We're 2 game weeks and one actual week removed from your game week 31 wild card. I listened to the podcast last week where you kind of talked through your team, your decisions. After the first couple of weeks, anything that you're feeling like really good about, really not so good about? I'm just curious, like for an early revisionist history or hindsight look at this wild card, like what are you thinking?
No, like I said, I think the only thing I've gotten wrong is the captain, right? Because I captained Salah last week, blank. Didn't even make 60 minutes. Captain Sonny this week, and he got 5 points. Could have had a haul if he'd have hit that last shot that the goalkeeper barely got his fingertips on. But that's really where I think I've missed because I said my goal was to average around 69 points a game week. Right, I got 65 the week right after my wild card, 69 this week, and looking to kind of repeat that, hopefully in a similar zone upcoming in 33. So I feel like we talk about the process, right? The process was right. It's just a matter of I can't get the captain right for some damn reason, and that's been the story of my whole season. I feel like.
Yeah. Do you feel like you want to go like more differential from here on out because you're not able to break away even after the wild card? Do you feel like wild card's in a good spot? Let's just like keep going and we'll expect to see some green arrows.
Yeah, I think that's the plan. Like we've said, I have my free hit still. Plan on using it in 34 still. So after that is when I'll probably start to get kind of wild with who I'm captaining and how differential I want to be. Right, you only got 4 game weeks after that, so not a lot of room to make up points. But I feel like again, the process is right. I just didn't captain the right person, and I think maybe it's just those trap games that we keep kind of falling into. The Sheffield Uniteds, the Luton Towns, where we think just because they're in the relegation zone or they're the worst defense, that the best player on the other team is going to haul against them, and that's just not really proven to be true, right? Unless you're Haaland in the fucking FA Cup where he scored 5 against Luton Town. Are we going to see a
Yeah,
repeat of that this week? I don't know, right? Is he going to get rested? Is he going to play 60 minutes? There's so many different factors coming from the European fixtures and all that. So I don't know, but long story short, I feel like I did get the process right. I'm happy with my wild card, happy with my returns. Now it's just where do I go from here, right? And that's
yeah.
kind of the move. 2 solid weeks, no transfers, and about where I want to be. I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I think we're both going to have a lot of transfer decisions this week because I also have two frees and I'm also planning on, a free hit in game week 34. And if, just a reminder to folks, if you play a free hit, you only have one free transfer the week after. So essentially, we have two free transfers in 33, one free transfer in game week 35. And we have to use the 33 ones. It's a use it or lose it
Yeah.
situation. So there's really it's hard to separate the transfers that we make this week from the plan the rest of the season, which I agree with you. I think when I was pulling up like transfer planner tools, etc., this is probably the hardest week from a transfer standpoint that I feel like I've encountered in quite some time. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I feel the exact same. I my biggest thing is I don't want to sacrifice present points for future points or vice versa, right? Which is what I feel like I'm doing. Like I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, Gibbs White has a good fixture, but maybe Gordon doesn't. But I want Gordon for 2 weeks from now, and if I don't transfer him in now, I'm not going to be able to do it later without taking a hit. So it's like doing all
Yeah,
this,
that's
like
such a good
trying
point.
future. It's whole. I mean, it sucks, right? Like I thought the free hit would be a blessing, but it's kind of a curse at this point.
Yeah, and you mentioned rotation. I think like the more that I'm listening and researching and kind of like absorbing FPL content leading up to 34, the less confident I am in the free hit because of the European fixtures and the short turnaround for a lot of teams. I listened to one of my favorite FPL podcasts, FML FPL, today, and they talked about how I think it's Liverpool or Arsenal, and maybe both of them have, essentially 2 days off between fixtures over the course of four fixtures.
Right.
So we're looking at a triple Arsenal, triple Liverpool, double game week in game week 34. You'd be lucky to get 120 minutes out of any of those players. Saka could be rested. Even Salah might not. He could play 60 and 30 or whatever.
Right.
I even have some drafts where I didn't free hit in game week 34 specifically because of this like fixture issue that might be
Sure.
resolved in game week 37, which obviously again completely throws the transfer plan. So hopefully by the end of this podcast, sometimes we end up more confused, but hopefully we get kind of all the options out there so that when
That's
when
right.
we listen back and hopefully when our listeners listen back, they get kind of some clarity or some ideas about what they might want to do. The other thing that happened while I was out of town, I wanted to ask you about was you attended the Premier League Fan Fest. I think it was in Nashville. Do you want to
It
talk about
was.
that experience? I think that's kind of a unique thing in the U.S. and I've always been curious if it's a good time. So I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a ton of fun, man. It was the closest one that's been to us here, kind of in the Midwest. So me and my buddies hopped in the car and drove down for the weekend and had a great time. Really good production. There were lots of legends running around. Rebecca Lowe waved and said hello to me after I screamed like a little girl, even though I'm almost a 30-year-old man. But that was definitely the highlight
Yeah,
of the weekend. Is
she's
she
incredible.
is
Like, would you rather meet Rebecca Lowe or like Harry Kane? I don't know. That's really tough.
I could understand Rebecca Lowe a lot better than I could talking with Harry Kane. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But anyways, yeah, she's a fucking national treasure. So that was great, right? Best part was the whole event was free, right? You just register for your tickets, and it was free. All the prices in the event were super reasonable. Bunch of TVs playing all the games. It was kind of a whirlwind. The first half of the Saturday afternoon fixtures were kind of stinkers because it was a bunch of 0-0 draws. But they came around and there was goals left and right and center, and it was just a really good time. I'd really do it. I'd do it again, even if it was like 6 hours away. I'd probably see if the guys wanted to do it. The only complaint I had was there were a lot of lines, and
Yeah.
we couldn't really navigate that the first day. Figured it out the second day. There was a lot of free swag for some clubs, but not for others, and I spied quite a bit of fake fans. They handed out more Chelsea flags there than I think there were people. I
The
mean, I saw
plastics.
oh my god, man. I saw Liverpool fans waving Chelsea flags. I saw Arsenal fans waving Chelsea
Oh
flags.
man.
Everybody and their brother was waving a Chelsea flag. Not a lot of Spurs gear. Apparently, it was over by Ledley King, and he was signing stuff. I missed that, but did see him on stage. You know, so really, really great experience. Highly recommend if it's anywhere near you. Sign up, register, have a great time. It was just a ton of fun.
You think the Chelsea swag is FFP related? You think NBC just kicked them, hey, we'll buy extra of your stuff, if you can get out of this jam, because that's huge for us. Every
Yeah,
single
well,
flag there is helpful right now.
Bailey
So that's great.
amortized the flag expenditure across 3 fan fests, I'm sure. But it was
Yeah.
cool seeing the reps of different teams, even Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, and them passing out little bits of swag. Got to hang out with the mascots. That was cool. A lot of really good activities, and it was just a lot of good fun. So definitely recommend giving it a
Did you
go.
meet any other fantasy players at all, or is it mostly just you feel like pure fans?
No, I think it was a lot of fans. I don't know how many fantasy players are here in the U.S. You know what I mean? My buddies play fantasy with me, so we were always talking. Our Twitter account's kind of cool because we follow so many of the FPL accounts that you get a lot of the leaks. So the whole morning Saturday, we had to get up at like 4 a.m. to get there in time. And I kept saying, "Oh, my source tells me Foden's on the bench," and my source says there's XYZ happened at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Game might not go ahead. So I was like, 10 minutes ahead of the launch, which felt kind of cool. So
Nice. Always good to be on the inside. Well,
that's
cool.
right.
I'm glad it was fun. I hope they have one out on the East Coast or even in New York coming up. I'm sure.
Oh, if they have one at New York, I'm flying out to go with you, Chris.
Yeah, you should. It sounds like a
Yeah,
blast. I'm sure we'd love it, and they do a good job. I mean, New York is nothing if not lines everywhere. So if any
that's
city
so
is
true.
gonna figure that out, hopefully it's us. Um,
That's right.
cool. Well, let's get into it. I'll just start off with some fixture reminders. First of all, just again, double game week 34 is coming up, not this week, but next week. Just a reminder: if you play a free hit or a wild card in game week 34, you will only have one free transfer in game week 35. So you can't roll a transfer after you use a chip. The teams with a double game week are Liverpool, Arsenal, Bournemouth, Palace, Wolves, Everton, and Sheffield United. We did want to note that Eight Nori from Wolves, who's a very popular asset for just generally, I think, right now, but also for double game week, picked up a knock, might not play, so one to keep an eye on. Um, the other thing I want to mention here is that there's a lot of European fixtures around both game week 33 and game week 34, so between 33 and 34 and between 34 and the double game week 34 fixtures. A lot of teams will play in Europe twice. Those teams are City, Arsenal, and Liverpool, and West Ham and Villa. So City and Arsenal in the UCL semis, Liverpool and West Ham in the Europa League, and Villa in the Conference League. So just an FYI, if you're considering either single game week or double game week assets, especially for those teams, we're kind of thinking there's going to be a lot of rotation, which again sort of impacts our transfer plans coming up. Anything you want to add to that, Jace? I feel like that's a pretty good kind of place to start for this week.
Yeah, no, I think you pretty well covered it, man.
Cool. Let's move on to our teams and recap our performance in game week 32. Jace, do you want to start with your team? Tell me what happened.
Yeah, like I said, 69 points. Everything went according to plan. I've never cheered a Newcastle clean sheet so hard. Started Dubravka in goal. He got the clean sheet, couple save points, couple bones. So 9-pointer from him, which was great. I hope that all goes to shit next week for him when he plays Spurs. Gabriella Dogi, 8 Nori in the back line. Udogi was the only one that blanked for me, but he could have had a goal or an assist. Had a great shot on target, hit it right to the keeper, unfortunately. But he was begging to return and just couldn't convert. Salah, Palmer, Saka, Son in the midfield, every single one of them returned for me. Captain Son got me 10 points. Muniz, Haaland, and Darwin in the front line. Muniz was the only one that blanked there. I initially had started Gusto as a fourth and only went with two forwards, but as everyone knows, he didn't. He needed a rest according to Pochettino, so he didn't feature, which means Muniz got subbed in for me. But I feel like I did pick the keeper right this week, just didn't get the captain right again. Unfortunately, should have just went with Salah instead of Son, but thought Sonny might turn it on, and he had the opportunity to. He just again couldn't convert, but didn't make any transfers. I got 1.1 million in the bank, two transfers that I rolled, and I am considering a ton of transfers now. So that's where I ended with game week 32. What about yourself?
Any Muniz regrets? He returned in 31,
Ah,
right, against or was that 30 against Sheffield, like kind of right at the death, and then has kind of it seems like he's sort
yeah.
of tapered off a little bit from the form that he was in.
It's unfortunate, but he's had good shots on target. I feel like I mentioned it in the last week's pod where I said Fulham was kind of reverting back. I think they were overperforming a bit, right? Playing a bit above their pay grade, which is great. We love seeing that from kind of the middle table teams, taking it to some of the bigger clubs like Spurs when Fulham put four on us. So I don't regret it. I feel like I don't have a lot of budget. There's not like a great $6 million striker option. So I'm fine with Muniz. He probably won't stay on my team for the next couple of weeks. Just trying to figure out what that exit strategy for him looks like. But no, I mean I don't regret it at all. The math made sense to me, and I don't know who I would have brought in that I could have afforded that would have done better,
Yeah.
without the benefit of hindsight.
It's great fixtures. His underlying numbers have still been really good. He was obviously a player in form. And I think just honestly listening to you on this podcast, like you were not having fun not having Moonies. And I feel like for you it's better to like own Moonies and have him not
That's right.
return. And then you could say, like, well, I got him, like I
Mm,
believed in this thing and I did it and it didn't work
yeah.
out. But like I did what I was saying I thought was good.
Better to have loved and lost than never loved at all, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like you're definitely in that camp with him. The other thing I've been doing a little bit more recently is looking at FPL Game Week, which basically gives you like a full recap of your game week. You can see which players helped you and hurt you versus the field. That's FPLGameweek.com.
Yeah.
I really leaned into this after game week 31 when I thought I had a very template team and did really bad against the field. So I wanted to like quickly pull up your team on this site and just take a look to see who hurt your team this week. And it looks like you did pretty well against the field because you had an Arsenal defender. So maybe like Saliba, Poro, 11 pointer for Spurs was maybe the one that stood out. And I did see, okay, so you downgraded to Udogi. Do you have any like Poro Udogi regrets? Because that's something I'm also considering is downgrading Poro this week. But then obviously he had a huge return, which was surprising, but like not a super high XG chance. I don't know how you feel about him versus the other Spurs defenders, given he had an 11 pointer.
Yeah, I mean, my only yeah, hindsight, right? Like that's what that could have been Udogi. I mean, he had several opportunities, several assists, potential assists that could have gone in that were botched or whiffed or hit over the goal. So I don't yeah, I mean, hindsight, I should have had Pedro Porro. I think I have the budget for him too. So that's probably where I could have done better on the wild card. But again, that's literally just for this game week. I don't see Poro scoring goals every week, right? And I still like Udogi. I think the value's there. So I'm probably going to stick with him to be fair. But beyond that, like you said, not a lot of people hurt me. I mean, Solanke's the biggest one, right? And Watkins. But I mean, I couldn't have afforded either of those in my team outside of Muniz in order to still have Holland and Darwin. So I don't think I have too many regrets there. Like I said, I still think my process was sound.
Yeah, Watkins 13 pointer, but his ownership is just significantly lower than it was a few
Hmm.
weeks ago. So not as big of a deal there.
And if Eight Nori had made it like just another fucking 10 minutes or something, then that's
Yeah,
another 4 points that were in the bag. That really sucked when he went out.
Yeah, likely
So
bonus too if they had
yeah,
claimed
yeah,
as well. Yeah,
yeah. And then they ended up giving those 2 late goals up, but there were there was potential here to haul, and it just didn't happen. Right, that's not how the goals fell, and that's FPL.
yeah, that's FPL. That's what we always say.
Uh,
Cool. We'll flip over to my team. This is a little bit of a bounce back week for me, which was desperately needed after a pretty poor game week 31. I had Petrovic in goal with 2 points, Branthwaite with 6 and a clean sheet for Everton, Pedro Porro with 11, and Reguilon as a substitute for Gusto with 9. Maybe my highest scoring defensive game week of the season with 26 points. I think that really carried the team this week, at least carried my green arrow. I have the exact same midfield as you, Saka, Palmer, Salah, Son, with a captain on Son for 10 points. Then a forward line of Haaland, Tony, and Solanke. Only Haaland returned, and frankly wasn't that impressive. I have no idea how he ended up on 2 bonus points. He obviously had the goal, but it didn't seem like he was as involved in that game. And that's kind of who he is as a player. He gets a few touches, but that's all he needs to punish you. I don't know. What did you see from Holland this week?
yeah, not a lot. I'm with you. I mean, KDB was running the show. Holland could have had a few more, I guess, but I just don't know what's with him. He got the tap in, which I guess is just matters that he got on the score sheet, but he didn't do anything today in the UCL match, right? So I don't know. I feel like he's one of those players, just like Muniz, though, where I would not be having a lot of fun if I didn't have him. Right, I'd be
Yeah,
hiding behind the couch for every City match, but I don't think he's killing it like he was. I mean, he was kind of lucky to get that goal, if we're
yeah,
honest. Yeah, KDB made it a whole thing happen. So, and then Kevin sat on the bench for the UCL match today, just like Foden sat on the bench at the weekend. So again, it's this pep roulette thing.
yeah.
But
I
yeah,
agree.
and I don't know. I'm not seeing a lot from Holland, but he's just so highly owned. You kind of have to have him, just like Palmer and Salah. So
I had a couple of drafts this week, like speaking of transfer plans, where I went without Holland. I actually downgraded him to Isak to go Isak early, and then upgraded one of my midfielders to De Bruyne and had a captain on De Bruyne. What I found was that in that team structure, I still wanted to play the free hit in game week 34, which made it really difficult to get Holland back for the double game week in game week 37. So I think it's reasonable to go without Holland, but you probably have to have him in game week 37, whether that's via free hit or free transfer or what have you. I think that's the one that could hurt you,
yeah,
really.
and you and I were doing the same transfer math there, right? Like, okay, if I sold Holland, I'd have this much budget, but when I want to bring him back in 2 or 3 game weeks, there's no clear path to him, especially if there's a price rise, right? I have budget or I have value in Holland right now, so it with my budget being what it is, I just feel like it would be almost impossible to get him back in for those game weeks, and I definitely don't want to go without him in a double
Right.
game week.
Right. Yeah, certainly at least without a hit. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, something to consider. And then kind of same thing looking at FPL game week. I got hurt by quite a few players this week, which is surprising. I didn't have a larger green arrow, but Gabriel, Darwin, Saliba, who I think the Arsenal defense again. Anytime that they clean, despite how well my team plays, it's very difficult to gain rank on these guys. And unfortunately, I think they're really good. They're great assets. They have better clean sheet potential than anybody in the league. I just am struggling to figure out how to get one of them into my team, especially with Spurs having 2 extra fixtures over Arsenal
Right.
to end the season. It's just difficult to justify Porro to Gabriel or Saliba or Ben White. So I've been a little bit stubborn in that area, but I can't say it's difficult to make the argument. I think to get an Arsenal defender in relative to what I would have to give up to do that. And
Sure.
Darwin 5 pointer was fine. Nothing really to write home about there. The other one I thought on this list was interesting was Zabarni, or at least last week. Zabarni had the clean sheet for
Hmm.
Bournemouth after a lot of people got him during the Bournemouth double game week. So Yeah, any other thoughts on this team? Anything you would look at or do differently? I know we'll talk transfers, but I feel like for this week this was a pretty good setup.
It's one thing, for Region to score 9 points. It's another for you to luck into those 9
Yeah.
points with
It
him
felt
coming off
good.
your bench. That's what really pissed me off more than anything is so many people made moves for, like, a Foden or a Gusto, right? And they started him, and then he didn't play, and then they got rewarded. Garnacho off the bench,
Yeah.
Region off the bench. I saw it on all the FPL community teams. It's like, "Oh, I sold my left nut for Foden, but he didn't play. Oh, look, I get a 6 pointer from Alanga off my bench. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
great, good for you.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks when it happens to someone else. It feels fucking incredible when it happens to you. I'll tell you, I was so ecstatic to
Uh-huh.
to finally hit on Reguilon after I was such a big proponent of him. Brentford as
Yeah,
a team has kind of gone downhill. The center backs are both hurt, so the clean sheet potential, even with good fixtures, hasn't really been there. But it was good to see he's still, an attacking wing back. He still has some set pieces. He's still pumping
yeah,
crosses into the box. Like, I'll probably hang on to him just because he's 4.4. Like, there's not really a reason to move off of him.
and he plays Chef U this week, right?
Yeah, they're Tony and Reguilon play Chef U this
Yeah,
week. I think Tony's
absolutely.
even a captaincy candidate. I'm not saying I'll go there, but it's something to think about. Maybe I'll captain Reguilon this week.
Yeah, hell yeah, that would be a shout. I have changed my tune on Region though because his obviously 2 assists helped Tottenham move into fourth, right?
Oh,
I
okay.
was cheering
Yeah.
him on at the end, so maybe he is proper Spurs and just wasn't showing his true colors. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm back in on Region.
Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, the other thing here too, just on transfers, a reminder, I took a -8 in game week 30 and used one free transfer in game week 31 to get Haaland. So my team was pretty well set up. I think the plan was kind of always to use two free transfers in game week 33 and a free hit in game week 34. Cool. With that, let's move on to the matches from game week 32. Right. First match that we want to talk about here is United 2, Liverpool 2. Kind of a crazy game where United scored two worldies. Liverpool pretty much dominated, yet this had a substantial impact on the title odds. I mean, this was undoubtedly a pretty bad draw for Liverpool. What'd you see from this one?
This was the best game I think I watched at the Fan Fest because there's just so many damn United and Liverpool fans, and the place was packed. One side of the place was cheering, the other side was groaning, and they were just going back and forth the whole time. So it was cool, but it was a pretty standard United outing. Bruno pulled that goal out of his ass. Thank you, Joe Gomez, for that. Bot was it? No, who was it? It wasn't Gomez. It was
Kwanzaa. I think
the
Kwanzaa
Kwanzaa.
just,
Kwanzaa.
yeah, turned
Yeah, it
it
was
over.
Kwanzaa. Yeah, Kwanzaa. That I mean, great assist there. Hell of a finish by Bruno. You can't doubt that, right? But
No.
I didn't really look before that like United were going to do anything, and then it gave him some life. So sucks, right? I don't really want to see Arsenal at the top of the table, but it'll make it feel that much better when they bottle it here in the next coming game weeks, I guess.
Yeah, I think the other thing I've started to hear chatter on the Liverpool side, and then I do want to talk about United. I think United are the more interesting FPL team potentially, in terms of like transfers for this week and in the short term. Is that potentially Salah has having a little bit of a mini slump where he's
Hmm.
still involved, he's still creating chances, but maybe just looks a step off. I don't really know if I buy that personally, but I think
Sure.
I've heard that take. I was curious kind of what your thoughts were.
Listen, he's Mo Salah. Just when you think he's down, he's going to come back and score a hat trick or something. I mean, I don't know. He seemed like he was at least making the right moves, right? He's doing the right actions, causing havoc. Could have had a couple worldies himself, right? Just a little off. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the United assets are fine, but do you really want to go without those Liverpool assets? I mean, we have to talk about the ones coming back, right? Alexander Arnold, Jota, and Allison all back in full training this week, confirmed. So that puts the Bradley owners on their toes, puts the Kelleher owners, me, on my toes. Same with your Darwin and Luis Diaz owners on how much Jada's going to participate. So maybe there's more confusion with the Liverpool assets. Because, I mean, who are the United assets that you'd consider, Chris?
Well, I think, first of all, great point on Liverpool. We should talk about some options maybe for Kelleher owners and Bradley owners, because I think there's definitely a couple. The reason I think United is on my shopping list is they're a double game week 37 team with great fixtures kind of in the interim. And even if you're not free hitting in game week 34, they're home to Sheffield United in 34. They're just single game week, but it's a great fixture, especially in a week that Sheffield has a double. Like imagine a rotated Sheffield United that are going at Manchester United. I think they just have a great fixture run. So for me, Garnacho is on my shopping list. It's been a mistake to go Alonga over Garnacho. I think I felt like I was overthinking that eighth attacker spot and that Alonga was worth a punt. Garnacho, I think, clearly has a lot of value as the eighth attacker and is a great bench boost asset in game week 37. So he's kind of on the list. I'm looking at Haaland. Same thing for game week 37 and great fixtures leading up to it. I think he's a decent third striker behind Haaland and Isak if you're playing a 3-4-3. I would also say Dallo and Onana. I don't like paying more than 4-5 for a keeper or for a defense that's a little bit shaky. The other alternative to those guys is Maguire at 4.2, who I think for a Bradley owner, as an example, is a good
Yeah, no,
alternative
that's
at a same
yeah, that's
price
a good
point.
point.
So that's
Yeah,
kind of where I'm at. I honestly I could end up bringing in two Man United assets this week, and I don't think that's completely crazy, especially with the free hit in 34.
no, that's a good point. I'm between Onana and Petrovic myself because I think Kelleher's days are numbered. So gonna wait and see what this week brings. But I think you're right with Garnacho. He's definitely the one that you want to own. I think he's the only one I'll probably own in 37, if I don't bring Onana in, just because I think Hoyland's too expensive for me right now. I don't think he works with the budget. And same with the other assets, like you said, Dallo. I don't know that I have the room to spend that much on a defender that's going to lead goals, because we know United is going to lead goals, right? They still have to play Arsenal.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I just don't know. I feel like the Liverpool assets are still more attractive to me, but there is more rotation risk and question marks on those than there are on those United assets. I feel like Onana, Garnacho, and well, at least they're nailed. I don't know about Harry Maguire. I mean, Harry Maguire, he's always him. There's just no getting away from that stigma at this point. So it'd be really
yeah,
hard for me to own Harry Maguire.
yeah. And to be clear, like no argument that Liverpool is the better team. Salah, Darwin, Liverpool defensive asset are better,
Mhm.
than any of the Man United guys. I think just at this point of the season, we're sitting in game week 33 with two free transfers with an eye towards 37.
Yeah,
Manchester United and Newcastle are kind of like the two teams outside of City that I think we're thinking about. So again, for me, not unrealistic to get two of these guys this week.
sure.
On the keeper, if you have money for Onana, could you get to like Raya and go double Arsenal defense? No. So it's like
I don't
just
want him.
Onana.
Don't want him. Don't want him.
Okay. Don't want him.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
Well,
and we'll get to this later, I'm sure. Well, yeah, did a couple games down, but I'm not an Arsenal double defense guy. I don't know that that's a
okay.
sound strategy for the run in. So I want to avoid Raya.
Okay. I think if you can't get the third attacker, or if your third Arsenal spot, if it's open, if you only have two, you have Saka plus defender or whatever, and you can't get another attacker, I still think the second defender is reasonable. And I would probably take Raya over Onana, but I don't know. That's super close because of the fixtures for Man United plus the double. Onana might outscore him the rest of the way. And I think Onana is probably more in line for bonus points too.
Yeah, he's definitely gonna have more saves. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly true. Um, Cool. Let's move on to the next fixture in the title race, which was Palace 2, City 4. We talked about Haaland didn't really look great in this game. Foden didn't play at all. De Bruyne was kind of the lucky ticket for this one. As we think about our transfers and knowing that City have good fixtures and double in 37, but have expensive assets, how concerned are you about rotation? I think Holland as a captain this week is a little bit questionable, given that he just played 90 in the Champions League. And I would even consider a transfer in for De Bruyne, given that he didn't play. So where are you at on kind of Pep roulette right now? What's your thinking?
This happens every season, right? With the Pep roulette, Foden scores a hat trick, and all of a sudden, oh, now he's rested that next game week,
Yeah,
right? De Bruyne plays the game of his life, and he's rested in the Champions League against Real Madrid. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, and I'm not a obviously I am nowhere near the football mind of Pep Guardiola, but it just doesn't make sense with me, and I'm torn between like trying to read his mind or just avoid them altogether, right? Like that's kind of where my head is at right now. And you say you make the transfer, used to bring someone in for a Holland, right? Like an Isak or a Wood or whoever, right? Someone in form. Then you can invest that budget into upgrading a midfielder to KDB. But what happens when neither of them play,
right.
and then Holland plays the next one, KDB's on the bench again, then KDB's plays the next one, and it's just I don't know how to put my thumb on it. So I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like, maybe I'm just gonna bank that Holland doesn't need 90 minutes to score, right? If he makes a 30-minute cameo against Luton Town, he can probably still bag two. So that's kind of where my head's at. I had KDB for like 5 weeks, like a lot of us did, and he returned once, and I just wish I held on to him now because I mean he looked fucking great against Crystal Palace, right? That first goal was insane.
Yeah.
That was came from the lane, you know.
I
I mean
I
from
mean
the flat,
that's where I was at, is like, well, shit,
yeah,
is KDB back now? But you're right. I mean, Foden had the hat trick this last week, or excuse me, the match before against Villa, and yeah, it's just difficult to predict. Maybe let's go asset by asset here. So Holland,
sure.
you think is an own. How do you feel about him as a captain this week?
It's risky. I think it's risky, just because we know Luton Town aren't the greatest, right? They've caused some problems for some teams, which is great. I hope they stay. I hope they beat City at the weekend, but I don't think it's going to happen. Morris might nick a cheap goal, but City are still going to come back and score three. So I still think you have Holland in your team. Probably don't captain him though, just in case he does get benched and comes off the bench and doesn't score. Then you're looking at a 1 pointer, right? And I think there are equally attractive
Yeah,
assets playing that are good captain candidates. So I think you have Holland. Just don't captain him.
I'm in agreement with that. What about De Bruyne? Do you feel like if you can get De Bruyne, is that a worthwhile move? I feel like I'm basically, if you did that, you're putting all of your chips in on like one game week. Like he's got to hit this game
Quite
week,
literally.
and I agree that seems risky. But if you're chasing, this seems like the optimal like moonshot to me.
Yeah, you listen to FML FPL. I mean, he captained
Yeah,
KDB
Walsh
last week,
captains
right?
KDB every
Walsh
week and
captained
is
him.
flying,
He,
right? Yeah.
flying. But no, I don't think. I think if you have a wild card, still it's interesting because you can
Okay.
bring him in without doing a lot of surgery to your
That's a
team.
great point. That's a great
But he's
point.
going to take two transfers to bring in regardless, and one of those is probably sending Holland or a Sonny or someone else out when those players have more attractive fixtures sooner. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be difficult for me to bring KDB in without taking a hit or doing a lot of surgery on kind of the framework I want to use. I'd much rather bring Foden in, I think. I mean,
Okay.
you saw the goal today. I mean, I think he's just been electric
Yep.
player of the season candidate, potentially. I mean, he's just anytime City have needed a goal, he's dug one out and he's done it in great fashion. The goal from last week was pure hustle, right? That
Yep.
that hat trick goal caused the turnover, got fouled, didn't complain about it, right? Won the ball back, and then it was a rocket into the top corner.
Yep.
You can't ask much more from a player. So I'm much more likely to bring a Foden in than a KDB.
Okay. And I agree. I think with the Madrid fixtures and given that
Yeah.
he played 90, it's probably 35 to 37 that you bring him in. Like would you use 2 transfers to get Foden this week? I think I would not. Yeah,
Nope.
no, okay.
Nope.
And what
Post free hit 34 though. I mean, he's
yeah,
the strategy is going to be what city assets can I bring in when, right?
yeah, and if you have the wild card, I think, like, the wild card 35 that we've talked about before, Foden, KDB, Haaland, like, I think that triple up actually could be pretty incredible there. You would go without, Saka and, potentially without Salah. You probably have to keep Son because of the double game weeks, but that could be an interesting team setup, or 3-5-2, with triple city there. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we're
for
in
sure.
agreement. Haaland is probably a keep. I think too risky to sell, but maybe don't captain this week. De Bruyne is an incredible differential, but you're going to have to give up a lot to get him in the team. So just make sure that you're looking ahead. And Foden is a buy, but probably not this week. Probably looking game week 35 plus. I think
Yeah.
we're in alignment on all of that.
What about a city defender, Guardiola? Rocket. He
Yeah,
embraced his inner Mickey Van de Ven today. I mean, obviously Pep's got to look at that and be like, maybe he is locked. I know there's a lot of rotation, a lot of injury back there. Is Guardiola worth a punt?
it's difficult because of the injuries in City's defense. I don't know if you know off the top of your head. If not, we can just go look at it real quick. But Ake, his kind of like timeline to recovery matters. We've also seen some Rico Lewis minutes,
Yeah.
which I think even Rico Lewis could be a little punty for a Bradley if he's your bench defender.
Yeah, he's been in my potential transfer plans this because he's another one that loves scoring goals, right? He dug that one out against Crystal Palace, which was great, and he's super cheap. So
Yeah,
if I was confident he was going to start, obviously didn't play today, right? So maybe he will play against Luton, and that could be where I go, because he's easier fixture. Give the young guy some minutes. He's proven he can score. So I don't know. I think Lewis is definitely worth a short term punt if you've got that in you.
yeah. I mean, you could even go. We've talked about Rodri before too. I don't love it because it blocks the triple up, but if
Hmm.
you aren't going to get 3 City, otherwise Holland, Foden, Rodri. If you can't get to De Bruyne, Rodri's a fifth mid. I mean, that's completely fine, to me as well for the double.
Yeah, I think he's a card risk for me.
Okay.
Um, Personally, I think he's probably one of those that is going to get a yellow card every game, right? So that hurts his BPS, and maybe he does get the odd goal, but I feel like I'd back Rico Lewis more to score than Rodri in some of these
Okay.
matches. So that's just where I'm at.
Okay. I think if I was gonna go defender too, just to wrap up, I think probably
Yeah.
Diaz right now would be
Oh,
the
okay.
guy for me.
Okay.
He's expensive. I think at that point you have to weigh him against an Arsenal pick, which is tough. But like we said, City do have good fixtures and a double game week, and I think he's probably likely to get the lion's share of the minutes, from what we've
Okay.
seen. But if Ake comes back and is healthy, that this all could be subject to change. Like you said, it's pep
Sure.
roulette time of the season. All right, let's move on
Fair enough.
to the next fixture: Brighton 0, Arsenal 3. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Everybody playing Arsenal during the run-in is folding, so we'll get that one out of the way.
All right. Yeah. Fair. I like saying it. I want to say it.
Go for it. You say it. You say it.
No, no, no. You already said it. It's not fun now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take the fun out of it. I just knew. Yeah, not great from Brighton. I think Arsenal are just kind of good though. That's just me. Um, Question here I have is it worth holding Saka and or the Arsenal defense through double game week 37? I think the question here is a lot of people are going to be tempted to move Saka to Foden, or move Saka to enable a move to Kevin De Bruyne, or potentially move Saka to enable a move to some people don't have Son. If they're not free hitting in 34, they might bring Son in 35, and Saka would go out. What's your take on Saka? Kind of game week 35 plus. Is it okay to move him on for a double game week asset in this period?
Yeah, I think it's okay to move him on for another Arsenal asset, if I'm being honest. I've looked at doing
Okay.
the move from Saka to Havertz, right? Cheaper. And Havertz has been in great form, and he looked great against Brighton. He was causing all sorts of problems for as much as Saka was absent from that game, Havertz was present. So to me, even in this free hit, I'm thinking of renting Havertz for
Yeah,
the week, right? As one of my 3 Arsenal assets. And by the way, I think you do have to have 3 Arsenal assets for the free hit, right?
yeah,
If you're doing it in double game week
yeah.
34.
And
Who
I'm
are those
probably
3?
I'm probably gonna take Raya because of the
You're gonna take
fixture
Raya.
congestion. I think he's the most
Okay,
likely to play 90 minutes both weeks, and then probably a center
that's
back.
fair.
So probably Raya, Gabriel, or Saliba, and Saka. I think those are gonna be mine. Saka's hard for me. I think Havertz might be the best Arsenal pick, but then Saka has penalties and set pieces, and if Arsenal get 2 penalties, then it's like, well, like you're a fucking idiot. I can't believe you just said, right?
That's a
Saka
good
did
point.
nothing, got a penalty,
That's a
8
good point.
points with his eyes closed. And I totally agree with you that he's a winger. Sometimes he can be peripheral. That's part of that position. Whereas Havertz is, in front of goal, making things happen. I see your point about Havertz being the better Arsenal asset, but the
That's a
the
really good point.
penalties can just kill you at any point, you
Yeah,
know?
they really can. Mo Salah did it to me for like the last 2 seasons with penalties. But Arsenal, they're playing Wolves and Chelsea. Excuse me, in game week 34. I mean, both of those teams looked like they could be bogey teams for Arsenal. I mean, Chelsea form has been horrendous, right?
Yeah,
Wolves have been playing really good football and really taking it to teams. I don't know that Arteta is going to bench his best players for this. I mean, he is holding on to the top spot by goal differential. So that's what really pissed me off about game week 32, right? Or 31 was all these guys resting their assets.
yeah.
And they're best players, and it easily could have gone against them. And you're trying to be too cheeky. But I think in a title race, you got to play. I mean, what's more important do you think to Arsenal right now, is a Champions League or the Premier League?
I think Arsenal honestly would say both. And to your point, like I think Saka might have to play every game, but let's say if Arsenal go up 2-0, he might be hooked at half. The nice thing for
Sure.
them is they do have a lot of depth. I think that's one thing their squad
Yeah,
building. They've done a really good job. Trossard is just awesome. Like
I've got him on my list.
he's an elite player to bring off the bench, and I don't think he's an FPL asset, but from a Premier League,
He
Champions League,
scores every time he comes on. What do you
well,
mean?
that's what I'm saying. Like he's incredible as a substitute. He can play wing, he can play nine. Like I think just like having somebody like that to give
Yeah,
Saka a rest when needed is actually huge for their squad, and probably
sure.
like does help Saka's chances. But I don't think you're getting 290s from Saka in this stretch. I think is the point. How about you?
Interesting.
How would you stack up the Arsenal assets for 34?
Right now, I think I'm on Ben White, Kai Havertz, and Saka. I think those are
Okay.
my 3 Arsenal assets.
I do like Havertz a lot. I think he's going to get
Yeah,
rotated, but he's just been so good. It is hard to keep him out.
yeah. So again, it's this whole roulette, trying to read these managers' minds that make this transfer decision that we have so damn difficult, because short term versus long term, right? Even though the long term is only like 4 or 5 game weeks,
Yeah.
it's tough to read. So it's really anybody's guess at this point. So maybe you do just gravitate to those who are going to play 90 as opposed to the heavy hitters. I don't know,
Yeah.
man. It's tough.
Well, it's a great segue. Let's talk about
Yeah.
some of the teams that are not playing in Europe or are playing in competitions where they might be able to rotate a little bit more, such as Villa playing in the Conference League and Brentford not playing in Europe. So this match was 3-3. Great match, honestly.
A lot of fun.
Um,
Yeah.
Brentford came back from 2-0 down. Looked like Villa had a chance to win it right at the end. A lot of different players getting involved. I think the one that stood out to me was Watkins, 13-pointer. Still the number one player in FPL this year, I think, or at least close to it. I have to double check that. Um, I was going to ask you any regrets on your wild card selling Watkins. Did we like somehow fuck this up again, or is this kind of a blip and he's just going to be fine the rest of the season?
We'll see. I don't know. I still don't regret the strategy of bringing in Nunez, right? Which is
Yeah,
why it's my Watkins spot, right? So I mean, I'm happy for Watkins. I think he's a good player. I think he got kind of lucky with those 2 goals, he wasn't, like, lighting up the pitch by any means, so I think he's had a really good season, player of the season candidate, definitely going for the golden boot. I'm cheering for him, but I don't really know that I'm that upset,
Yeah.
that I sold him because it gave me a little extra budget, and I don't know that I could afford Watkins right now anyways and still make the moves I wanna make in the upcoming game weeks for, the Spurs-Chelsea double fixtures and 37 and all that, so it's just not there's not room for him, right, over an
Yeah.
Isak and Nunez and even Nicholas Jackson, right? If you want to go there, which I don't know that anyone does at
Uh,
the moment, but
yeah.
there's potential for that. But he just eats up that second kind of mid tier forward spot. So I don't know that there's room for him. I mean, he's still beating the shit out of you left and right. So you've
Yeah.
been like his arch nemesis all season, right?
Yeah, I don't know how I ended up, like, fading all these popular assets. This will be a good postmortem thing because it's certainly not I don't see myself necessarily as a contrarian player, but it kind
Sure,
of happened
sure.
organically this season with Watkins and Arsenal defense. Yeah, I think just, like, looking at the fixtures, between 30 and 33, Watkins had Wolves home, Man City away, Brentford home, and then next week is Arsenal away. So he was always going to haul in one of those,
hmm
right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It happened to be home Brentford, but
Yeah,
he blanked against home Wolves and blanked against City. So think if he blanks again against Arsenal next week, like even those points out, like yeah, you hit 13, but still not necessarily like an elite striker between that
yeah.
window with another blanks, right?
He only got 3 more points than Nunez over the last 2 game weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm with you, especially with, if you're not free hitting, Nunez has the upcoming double. I think 31 for Nunez with Sheffield, totally worth a hit.
hmm
Not a hit. I guess worth a
He
hit, but
returned.
worth a
Yeah.
shot. Yeah.
Great,
Um,
great goal by him. He was the human wall.
right. Yeah. On the flip side, Tony was rested in this fixture, came on late. Do you think he's a legitimate captaincy candidate this week? Because I have him. No. Home Sheffield off a rest. You don't think so?
The home Sheffield fixtures have burned us. It feels like every time we try and captain someone against them. And that's why I just feel like and maybe Tony's a punt, so he doesn't follow that trend, right? Maybe he's a differential, which I would say Tony's probably is a differential at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
I can't imagine a ton of people have him.
He's
So
9% owned
yeah,
right now. So
under
yeah.
10%, definitely a differential. So maybe he falls outside of that trend, but to me, the home Sheffield, home Luton, away at Sheffield, away Luton has burned me. It seems like every time I try and go that route. So I would stay off him if I had him just for that fact. But again, if it's a differential that I mean, it's not horrible, right? Like it's still a really sound plan. It just seems like it goes against the trend we've seen over the
Yeah.
season. So what are you going to do it? I mean,
I mean, it's an option. It's difficult because I tend to not captain differentials. Like, I think
hmm,
just owning Tony, right? I'm gonna get a lot of his points this week if he does
sure.
score, which will help my rank. At the same time, given what we just said about Holland, there are a lot of captaincy candidates this week, and in my
Hmm.
opinion, there's not necessarily a clear standout captain. And Tony has the best fixture. He's the best fixture in the league, and like I said, he was rested last week. Now I know he was injured at warm up the week before. It was kind of
Hmm.
weird whether he was going to play or not. He ended up playing, so maybe this is like a little bit of injury or fatigue hangover. I'm not exactly sure, so that's a concern. But if you're going to tell me like, hey, one of the probably five best strikers in the Premier League was rested last week and he's got home Sheffield next week, it's hard to, I'm not saying 100% yes, but you
Sure.
can't close that door completely. I
No,
think
no, no.
he has
I
to
think
be
you
in
should do it.
consideration. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't
Okay.
talk about it. Be about it.
I
And
talked
that's
you
not
into
just
it.
because I'm like 30 points behind you in our mini league or anything like that. What about Embuemo or Wissa? I mean, they both played really, really well in the latter
Yeah.
half of that Aston Villa match. I mean, first 20 minutes aside.
Yeah, and Buma was on my original transfer plan. I think like before the double game weeks were announced, we didn't know when fixtures. Like I was going to be tripled up on Brentford in this part of the season with
Sure.
Bumo coming in as the fifth mid. I think right now it's difficult to transfer in Bumo over Anthony Gordon. They both have great fixtures, but Gordon is going to have the double game week later on in the season.
Yeah,
So to me,
that's a good
Gordon
point.
wins the tiebreaker. But like I think
Mhm.
I don't hate Bumo if you're like I feel really strongly about this player in this fixture and you're fine holding him. Yeah, I mean I could totally see it.
Yeah. Good segue into the next match there with Gordon.
Yeah, Fulham nil, Newcastle one. Not a whole lot to say on the Fulham side from this game. I think like Newcastle from an FPL standpoint is like probably where most of the focus is.
Yeah.
How would you rank the Newcastle assets for game week 35 plus? Because I think we have Isak one, Gordon two, and I have no idea who the third best asset from Newcastle is.
Dubravka.
Dubravka, but what if Pope comes back?
He's out for the season, isn't he?
The last I saw was he was like late April.
I
So
thought he was out for the rest of the I thought he had a setback, he was out for the rest of the season. We should confirm that though, because that will change my plan. I fully brought Dubravka in thinking he was set for the rest of the season, so that could fuck me later. But I think it's Gordon over Isak personally. Just like 2 game weeks ago, Isak benefited from Gordon's work rate, which was unfortunate because Gordon drew all those penalties. Isak just got to convert them,
right.
right? And if Isak's off the pitch, who's on penalties at that point? Is it Gordon? Is it, if Trippier comes back, you know, there's a lot to be said there. But there's a lot of unknowns with the Newcastle injuries still. You were high on Trippier potentially a couple weeks ago. Are you still feel like he's an option, or you think he's too much of an unknown?
I think the defense for Newcastle is just too bad to have a
Yeah.
premium play. Like I would rather have Trent for single game weeks if you're going premium, or even like Poro from Spurs is like a much better pick in that window.
Why do you say Isak over Gordon? Is it? I think Gordon's at a better price point and better work rate.
I think Isak is a striker versus a winger. I think he's more involved in front of goal. You just made the point about penalties.
Yeah,
Isak's on pens, Gordon's not. I think Gordon is also going to have some competition with Harvey Barnes, especially in these doubles. And as long as Callum Wilson is out, which again, Callum Wilson could come back too.
yeah, that's true. Who knows with Eddie Howe? He's a fucking
Right.
liar.
Yeah, I thought Gordon was like out for the season earlier, right? Or
Yeah,
something
exactly.
fucking
Right, like two
insane.
weeks ago, he wasn't coming back. Fuck me.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like Isak is just the goal scorer on that team. Like everything goes through
Okay.
Isak. And when Newcastle score, like Isak is scoring for me, and sometimes Gordon as a winger can be a little bit more periphery. I think great pick. I'm still he's on
Yeah.
my list of targets. Why do you think Gordon?
I like his work rate. I think he creates a lot of what Newcastle what you would call attacking power from Newcastle. I think he creates a lot of that. He runs, and even though he's supposed to be out for the rest of the season, he still manages to play. I saw a lot of jokes about like him with the red card on that suspension. People still thinking he was going to show up somehow
Right.
because that's how he's been all season. So I like Gordon a lot as a player. I like his work rate, and I think he's more active. I would guess the underlying non-penalty underlying numbers prove that point. Uh, don't know that off the top of my head, but that's just what I'm going to assume. And I like his price point better. That being said, I plan on owning both of them in the next 3 game weeks. So that's why I think I'm going to move Nunez to Isak at some point. It's just a matter of when. I'm going to upgrade Gibbs White to Gordon at some point. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of when.
Yeah.
So I think having both of them is the right call. I don't know who the third is now that you've put that doubt in my mind about Dubravka.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It doesn't seem like Pope's comeback is conclusive, but I didn't see anything that said season injury or season ending
Gotcha.
injury, so he could be back. Um, Gordon's underlying numbers, I've spent some time looking at this because I'm kind of between Garnacho and Gordon as the fifth
Hmm.
mid for the bench boost, and I can do different things at those price points with the forward line. Um,
Absolutely.
the underlying numbers, surprisingly, between Gordon and Garnacho are not that different. I think Garnacho is like 0.39 expected goal involvements per 90, and Gordon is 0.42. I thought Gordon was going to be much higher, and at least from like an underlying number perspective, he's not. But Gordon has also drawn, like you mentioned, he's drawn a few penalties this year, as has Garnacho, to be fair. But
Yeah, they pass the torch on to each other. Yeah. Garnacho draws 2 penalties. Gordon draws 2 penalties.
right. So yeah, something to consider, I think,
It's a good
is
point. Yeah.
the trade-off between Gordon and Garnacho. What else can you get with that like extra million in there? Is that a better defender or a different striker, kind of like down the stretch for you?
Yeah. No, I think it's a really fair point to make. We think Isak, though, you agree, is Darwin's got to go out for Isak in the
Yeah,
next 2 weeks, right? Yeah.
100%. After 34, I think Isak has to be in
Yeah.
because he's
Yep.
home Sheffield 35. I think he's probably the
Yep.
captain. Yeah. Unless you captain a double game maker for Chelsea or Spurs. So actually, he's not necessarily a lock, but he's a candidate.
Sonny would be the only one I would consider in that situation, and I'm maybe too nervous to even rely on Son as a captain, let alone someone from Tottenham to score a goal in those 2 fixtures. So, those might test our friendship, Chris.
Yeah, that could very well happen. I think a Spurs Chelsea double game week is great for this podcast though, because
No, it really
we're
is. It
gonna be
really is. Absolutely.
all about
Yeah.
it. All right, let's keep rolling. Sheffield United 2, Chelsea 2. This was a disaster. This really hurt Chelsea's European hopes. They had 2 games in hand. I think they had a legitimate shot at sixth, but they dropped points to 10-man Burnley at home and away to Sheffield United, and frankly should have dropped points at home to Man United as well. Um, I listened to the game week 31 pod that you did, and you were very critical of the double Chelsea defense. And I know you said like, well, their backline sucks. Um, do you think if you're on Gusto and Petrovic like me, is that worth a transfer at this point, or do you have to hold given the additional fixtures that Chelsea have upcoming?
I think you gotta hold, personally, especially because 'cause you're free hitting and are you free hitting in 34? Have you decided? Yeah.
Yes.
Since you're free hitting in 34, I definitely think you hold. Gusto got a rest, and he's shown he can return. So I still think he's fine. I do question Petrovic in goal, just because I think Sanchez is hurt, right? Because I don't even think he was on the bench
Yeah.
the last couple of matches. So there's no, I guess, rotation risk. But I'm just not sold on the double Chelsea defense in the coming weeks in a double game week with Tottenham, who again is almost guaranteed to score at least 1 goal for the season. So if you had 2 Chelsea wingers or wing backs, whatever, right? 2 Chelsea defenders who you thought had good goal potential, I would like that over
Yeah.
Petrovic in goal, just because you have the return potential. But I don't know. I haven't gone to Petrovic in goal yet, and again, even with the double game week, like I said, 1 point in each match only gets you 2. So at that point, you
Yep.
might as well just have a single game weeker in goal. So I do think if you can find a better option, right, like maybe a Petrovic to another goalkeeper, maybe that's the route to take if you can afford one even at that point, because I'm guessing you went to Petrovic because you needed some budget, right? At some point,
Yeah.
he's not a dirt cheap, but he is an enabler. So
Yeah, he's 4 or 5. He's not like one of these
yeah.
guys like Ariola or Dubravka that's below
Hmm.
4 or 5. I think this is another good like process results. My kind of process going into it, also think the Chelsea defense sucks, and clearly they do. But if no one is keeping clean sheets, why not get the guys with the extra fixtures and that are playing
Yeah, I mean
two
that's
promoted
yeah,
teams,
that's fair.
right? And
Yeah.
I looked at the clean sheet odds for Chelsea over the last 3 fixtures. So they had 44% chance of a clean against Burnley, 25% chance of a clean against Man U, and 36% chance of a clean in this fixture against Sheffield. So basically like 1.05 clean sheets was sort of their like expected cleans. And I think if there's one clean out of these three, it's like a totally different picture. But the fact that they got
Yeah,
0,
absolutely.
um, really is pretty dire. The other thing I agree with you on Petrovic. I think like statistically, his goals allowed versus his expected goals on target allowed has been one of the worst in the league, which is crazy because eye test wise, watching these games, to me, he's clearly better than Sanchez, who like
Mm,
made so many errors in possession. But Sanchez might be the better shot stopper. And I think given the pressure on Pochettino after these results and the number of goals allowed, I could now see a scenario where they go back to Sanchez, whereas I did not see that scenario at all
right.
3 weeks ago. So it's put me in a little bit of a pickle. But I'm just not sure outside of Raya, like who's the other goalkeeper that I have to have. There's really no one that jumps out at me.
Yeah, and like I said, it's who's the other goalkeeper you can afford, right? Especially if you're like me and you're Kelleher, Dubravka. I don't have the value to get to a better goalkeeper if I
Yeah,
don't make moves now, right? So I don't know. Petrovic might be there. It might be Onana. I think both options suck as far as clean sheet odds go, but at least with Onana, I think he's going to get
yeah.
those save points. So that's just kind of where my head's at.
I was gonna say that will, I think, factor into my transfer decision this week. I
Hmm.
might be that Garnacho versus Gordon debate. I might be more likely to go Garnacho, knowing that at some point I might need funds for a goalkeeper. I mean, you can always
Yeah.
create money for hits, right? But like, if I have a
Yep.
little bit more in the bank, maybe I can get to Onana or Pope or something like that later on. And Ariel is hurt too, so I only have one keeper, which could be a big problem. So
Especially if you want to bench boost down the road, you know?
right, yeah.
Yeah.
All
Good
right.
point.
Last fixture in this group, Spurs 3, Forest 1. The only question I have here wasn't I felt like a dominant game from the Spurs attack, but you guys got it done. Any updated thoughts on a third Spurs asset for those owning Sun plus defender at this point? Like, I still think there's not really a clear option here.
Yeah, I will say we were pretty dominant before we gave them that goal, right? I mean, Romero touched the ball perfectly into Wood's path, I know they missed a few point blank. That's fine, but before that, I thought it was pretty dominant from us. The way we play is just tough, right? We're going to have the ball a lot. The other team's going to sit in if it's not a top five side, and it's just tough to go against a parked bus like that. I think BJ is the only third option, Brendan Johnson, and I think he may even have. I think there may be some merit to going from Sun to Johnson to free up funds because
Really?
he has been involved in everything. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's wrong. I don't think he didn't get a return right for this game week um, because it was a Timo assist for the own goal. He assisted the assister for the Van de Ven rocket, and then yeah, um, it was the header to Pedro Porro
I was
from
gonna look that
benching
up,
turf.
but I
So
wanted to see if you could do
yeah,
it off the top of your head, which you
no, I
did.
did. Yeah, I
So that
just
was
played that
nice.
back. Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, I think Johnson that this was his gap, right? He blanked this week, but I think he's back, and I think he gets at least 2 returns in the next 3 matches. So that's where my head's at. He looked more likely to score than Sonny did, is what I'll say.
Expected goal involvement last 4 weeks: 1.38, 1.19, 0.59, and 0.88, which are those are pretty elite
Really
numbers. The
good.
Spurs
Yeah,
have had great fixtures, of course, but you're right. He's averaging his form over the last 30 days, 5 points a game. In total, 3.9 points per match. I mean, yeah, the underlying numbers there in recent form would actually like certainly support him as a pick. Would you
yeah.
take him over Garnacho or Gordon? He does have one extra fixture compared to those players.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think the only way I bring Johnson into my team is if I do the lateral move from Sonny to him to free up some room.
Yeah. Okay.
Because like you said, there's cheaper options that also double right down the way and have better fixtures because Spurs running is tough, right?
Yeah.
You've got City, Arsenal, Liverpool, like Chelsea, all within the span of I think 9 days, 10 days, something like
Yeah.
that. It's crazy. So it's going to be tough after that double game week. You're kind of going to want to like maybe bench him for a week or two, and that's why I think the move for Johnson for Sun makes sense because I can bench Johnson and not feel bad about it. I'm not going to bench Sonny. You know what I
No.
mean?
Yeah. I can't get on board with Son. I think he's out of position. Midfielder playing striker. Obviously, like a very consistent FPL asset, one of the best this season. But I could see, we talked about Saka. I could see a
Yeah,
downgrade from Saka to Johnson, and you say, okay, Johnson has two extra fixtures, and Arsenal have a little bit tougher run in. But even like Spurs' doubles are not great. They have
they're not great, and that was my
yeah,
last point too. Right? Is my feet are on the ground enough to know that I don't expect us to win. I maybe expect us to get 2 points out of those
Yeah.
uh, 5 fixtures, right? So that being said, I still think we're going to finish ahead of United, and we're going to be neck and neck with Villa for that fourth place spot. But I'm being realistic here, and that's why I mentioned, if you can free up three million by having Spurs representation for someone who's going to play and be involved, and then you can also bench him and not feel bad about it. I think that's a fine move if you're not planning on playing every week with 5 midfielders.
Okay.
But like you said, there are cheaper options that have equal output. So yeah, I think there's potential for both of those.
Okay. I think I'd opt for him as, potential fifth mid. So you have Son, you have
Yeah,
defender, and then maybe Johnson is also in there. Um,
yeah. I
all right.
definitely don't think you go Werner as a striker.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah,
All right, let's blow through these last few matches. Everton won, Burnley nil. Clean sheet for folks with Braithwaite. Not much else here. The only player I wanted to bring up was DCL. Um, Goal was pretty fluky, but I think overall he had a pretty good match. You think he's a shout down the stretch? I just feel like Muniz, Chris Wood. There's just other budget forwards here, right?
yeah. That's a pass for me, dog. I think there are better options in his price point, like Mateta, Kuna,
Yeah.
Muniz,
Yep.
Wood, like you said, all who double. If you don't have a free hit for 34 and you want to make a move from Muniz to DCL, right, or something like that,
Sure.
for a punt, sure, have at it, right? But I don't. I think you stay away from the Everton assets. Although they did get another -2, right? They got a
Yep.
2 point deduction after their last point deduction. They had a huge improvement in form, great bounce. So maybe they'll have another deduction bounce,
The
and
deduction bounce.
you can
I love
be
it.
on the ride for that. Yeah,
I love it. Okay. Moving on to the last game. Luton 2, Bournemouth 1. Nice win for Luton. I think that has to be good for
yeah,
morale after the 4-3 turnaround. It was good to see them win this one, and I think deserved in this game too. Like Neto
yeah.
to even keep Bournemouth in it was pretty unbelievable. Um,
Hmm.
Question on Solanke. You think you stick with him, or is it time to move on to other assets? If you wild carded, I think you're probably off him if you're free hitting in 34 already, but
Yeah.
a lot of people, including me, still have him in their team.
If you're on him and you've got a free hit, I think you can twist. If you don't have a free hit, I don't understand why you sell
Yeah,
him at that point, right? Because you want to have as many of those fixtures represented in your team as you can. But if you're looking to downgrade and free up some budget, that's a move, right? If you've got your free hit, I think that's probably what everyone's thinking, right?
yeah. I'm depending on what I do this week. I might just strictly because of the fixtures, and I'll have a little bit of time to evaluate him. But I could see myself keeping Tony and upgrading Solanke to Isak. So I'd have a front line
Yeah.
of Haaland, Tony, Isak. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think game week 35 plus Solanke is totally fine to move on. Either downgrade to one of the cheaper options that we just mentioned, or upgrade him to a more consistent elite forward.
What about a Zabarni? What do you think?
Uh,
A lot of people took a punt on him in the wild card
yeah, I mean, kudos, right? If you did, because you got a clean coming out of
and a
what was
goal.
it, game week 31, and a goal, right? Which was a big deal for those folks. So probably similar, right? Keep him through their double game week. I think he's totally fine to hold, and then probably 35 plus. You could move him on. What is he like
If
four
I
or
wanted
five,
to
right?
Yeah, if I wanted to, it would be a lateral move from Anthony Robinson to Zabarni. What do you think?
I would look at Munoz from Palace. If you don't have
Oh,
him,
okay.
is like maybe a better option. I can't remember if he price rose or not, but
He did.
Palace has two home fixtures in game week 34, and then pretty good fixtures after that. And he's just a little bit more of an attacking pick for me, so I like him.
Ah, it's a good shout.
Yeah. All right, last game, Wolves 1, West Ham 2. Only note I really had here was that Cunha returned to the lineup, so just an FYI for transfer plans. I think he's fine to go for this week, and then fine to include in the double game week. If you're on a free hit, maybe keep him out of your team this week on free transfer. Then you kind of get a week to see if he's
Yeah,
playing, if he's back fed, and then could potentially include him.
yeah. I think he's potentially worth a punt for 24, but like you said, let's just see what 33 brings us.
Yeah,
And with
34.
it, 8 no, 34.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I said. Free punt and 34. Let's see what 33 brings us though.
yeah.
Ain't Nori's injured though, like we talked about, and he went off pretty early. So seemed to me that it was kind of serious, but he does have a week to recover. Is this a if I have eight Nori, do you hold him?
Yeah, I think you do, unless you get definitive news that he's not playing, and you still have, even if he's out this week in 33, you still have another week to 34. And Wolves are not in Europe, so they will have a quick turnaround on their fixtures, but they don't have quite as many games as like City, Arsenal, Liverpool. So for me, I'd probably hang on to him, even if he only plays one game. He's obviously playing in a very attacking position, part of the field. He would not be a priority out. I would rather do the other move that we mentioned, which is Robinson to Munoz from Palace.
Fair enough. That makes sense.
But we'll see. We got press
Yeah.
conferences. I just hold on to it and see what
Leaks.
happens.
Yeah. Sources. Our sources on Twitter.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking.
All right, let's move on to our last section, transfers and captaincy. Again, I think we have quite a few transfers to talk about, but hopefully kind of after going through all the games, I have a little bit more clarity. I think even like the goalkeeper discussion was helpful.
Yeah.
So do you want to go first, or you want me to kind of throw out where I'm at?
You go first because I still have a lot of questions. So maybe you'll
Okay.
answer some of mine.
Okay. So I'm free hitting in game week 34. I have my free hit
Right.
chip. So all of the transfers I have under consideration are geared towards double game week players that also have good fixtures for
Hmm.
37. That leads me to Manchester United assets and Newcastle assets for the most part. Those are kind of what I can afford. I will likely not get a striker this week because Tony is home to Sheffield United, so I'm not going to jump to Isak. And Solanke has an okay fixture. And if I wanted to go Solanke to Isak, I'd have to downgrade elsewhere first. So if I'm making a transfer, it's in the midfield, it's in defense, or it's in goalkeeper. In the midfield, I'm looking at Alanga, who's my fifth midfielder right now. I can go two ways. I can go to Garnacho, or I can go to Gordon. We talked about it, right? Garnacho has similar underlying numbers. More cash would be available in the bank elsewhere. However, Gordon probably gives me a little bit better bench boost, but a little bit less future flexibility. I also, if I go Gordon, have to downgrade elsewhere. The other transfer
Understand.
I'm thinking of is in defense. Well, let's not go there yet. Let's talk about the midfield. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on Garnacho, Gordon / other midfield options?
I think it's funny because we're both stuck on Newcastle midfielders that we're trying to upgrade, right? You've got Alanga. I've got Gibbs White.
Forest, yeah, Forest to Newcastle mids, yeah,
Yeah. They've got Wolves and Everton as their next two fixtures. I know you're probably not going to play them in 34, right? Because they're double game weekers that are a bit more attractive. But then they've got City in 35, so you definitely
right,
want to get off them on 35. But they're home to Wolves in 33, so I
yeah.
feel like I'm going to shoot myself in the foot if I send out Gibbs White for Garnacho or for Anthony Gordon, especially if Gordon blanks against Spurs. It's a tough position to be in because we both know who we want to move out. It's just not time to move them out yet, right?
Yeah, but at the same
Or
time, we have this transfer dilemma where we have
yeah,
two, we have to use it. Otherwise, we'll lose it in the free hit, and that's fine. We don't
yeah,
have to use it, but I think because we're trying to bench boost in 37, we have to have 15 players that we can count on. So every
yeah,
transfer between now and then is valuable, and I think for me, especially on Alonga, Gibbs White's a little bit better potentially, but for Alonga, like that's worth it. I don't value Alonga enough to hold him against Wolves unless I want to use two transfers elsewhere in my team.
yeah. I think your point here, Chris, and this may have just solved mine, but Bournemouth away for United in 33.
Yeah.
So not the best defense in the world, right? Sheffield United at home in 34, and then Burnley, like you mentioned earlier, in 35. So I think Garnacho's potential in those three fixtures is much higher than Elanga's. So I think it's free to move for him. And Gordon, I don't know. I like your point with Garnacho about how much cheaper he is, and their underlying numbers aren't that different.
Yeah.
To me, it's almost worth because that's an extra five. $6 million for me to go from Gibbs White to Garnacho, and maybe it's a lateral move for you from going for Alenga to Garnacho, but at least you don't have to spend extra on
Yeah.
Gordon. So I think I'm moving. I think you kind of made my mind up for me. I think I'm moving Gibbs White on for Garnacho.
The only problem for us on Man U is that the Sheffield fixture that United have in 34 is our free hit. So
Yeah.
I'm really not even considering that in their fixture
No, but
ticker.
you're probably gonna bring him in though, right? I mean, Garnacho against Sheffield. That's a tasty fixture at Old Trafford. Maybe it's also right for them to get punched in the face against
Right.
Sheffield. I guess I don't know based on how the season's going.
Well, if I'm on a free hit too, again, there's a lot of double game week players, but also like Fernandez, I think is an option on a free hit, right? Why have
Sure.
Garnacho when you can have Bruno, especially if I'm not going to have
Especially because he's
Haaland?
on penalties.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he's on pens. Like that might be my United asset. So that's where it's tough. So yeah, I think you still get a great fixture in 35, but then Newcastle have Sheffield and Burnley, I think, after that point. So it's sort of a tie for me on fixtures, and Newcastle's double in 37 is slightly better. I think Manchester United have Arsenal in their double, if I remember correctly. So it's a little trickier.
Is it worth the money, Gordon over Garnacho, for that extra slightly better fixture and potentially slightly better potential return?
I think for me, because I have two injured players on my bench. I have Areola hurt, and I have Amari Bell hurt from Luton, and potentially a keeper issue with Petrovic. It might
Yeah.
make sense for my team to be a little bit more conservative. This also would allow me to stick with Poro, who I think could be a really explosive asset during Spurs' double game weeks. Let's talk about defense actually too, because these are tied together. The defensive transfer I'm thinking of, or transfers I'm thinking of, would be to downgrade Poro, similar to what you did, to either Udogi or go even further to Van de Ven, who's 4.4. That would allow me to keep the extra fixtures from Spurs, but spread my cash around more effectively for the bench boost. So I'd
Yeah.
be much more comfortable with Gordon if I downgraded Poro to Van de Ven because I have a little bit more money in the bank.
Yeah, I mean Van de Ven, he's good. He's an injury risk though, right? He's been
Sure.
injured 2 or 3 times this season so far, and he doesn't get forward a lot except for on set pieces. And I don't know where he came from for that goal, but god damn, that ball, if the goal wasn't there, that ball would still be traveling.
Yeah.
He hit that thing so hard. I think a lot of people are going to use that to be like, oh, I can go to Van de Ven now because he got a return. I don't think he's going to get a return again this season. Spurs certainly are not going to keep a clean sheet.
Right.
I don't think we have one clean sheet in us for the rest of the season. I really don't. Maybe against Burnley and Sheffield towards the end, because I think those are our last 2 matches, and they'll likely already be confirmed relegated at that point. So we'll don't really see another free hit from Spurs this season. So that's why I would say don't go Mickey, go Dogie if you do want to downgrade. I do see where Mickey gives you more money, but I still think you maybe just stick with Udogi.
Okay. So that's good to know. The other defensive transfer would be Amari Bell because he's injured. I could get him out for Van Hecke from Brighton to prepare for
Okay.
their double at 4.1, or Harry Maguire 4.2. Better fixtures also have a double, so it'd be a chance to like address an injury on the bench and get somebody for a double game week, which could be important given the
Yeah.
upcoming fixtures.
I don't think Maguire is nailed on for United, and I don't think he helps you with your potential bench boost in 37 if he's
Okay.
not guaranteed to play, right? That just in my head, that's kind of where I'm at. So I like the Van Hecke one better. Granted, I don't see Brighton keeping clean sheets either.
Right.
So is it a price point with Van Hecke?
Yeah. Yes. Because Amari Bell is 3.9.
Yeah,
So basically, if I don't downgrade Poro, I'm looking at like 4.1, 4.2 for these other guys.
that's fair. Yeah, I like the Van Hecke transfer better just because I think he's probably more consistent and nailed on than Maguire is. I don't know that Maguire is nailed on, but Maguire does have the potential to be thrown on as a forward at the end of a game. So there's always that.
Yeah, I'll have to look at this. I kind of thought Maguire was nailed with Martinez's injury, but I'll have to do some more
Sure.
research on the United backline. Dallo is the other guy from the United backline that I
I
think.
like Dallo. He's just kind of pricey, right?
Yeah, it's at 5.0. He's got incredible fixtures, but I'm not super keen on United keeping cleans while they're playing Johnny Evans and Maguire defensively. But
Right.
he could be a really explosive asset against Burnley, especially
Yeah.
if he cleans and has an attacking return. But again, he's 5.0, so at that point, you might as well stick with the Udogi from Spurs at that price point.
He can hit the piss out of the ball, though. I
Yeah.
mean, he's got good delivery and he loves a far out banger. So I like Dallo. I know he's a little more expensive, but if I was going to go to a United defender, it would be Dallo over Maguire, even if I have to pay more.
Okay. What about you? What are you thinking?
I need to get rid of Kelleher. That's coming. So the only one I can really afford, Petrovic. If I downgrade uh, Gibbs White to Garnacho, though, I can probably get to Onana or someone,
Okay.
even like
I
you
like
said,
that.
uh, Raya potentially as well. So I think my priority is getting Kelleher out and also getting Gibbs White out. Robinson is a third, but I think I can kind of hold him because he's consistent, and Fulham are pretty middle of the row. So I'm not really concerned, and he's pretty attacking. So the only issue is they play Crystal Palace at home this week, and I think Kelleher's probably got one more in him before they play Allison, before they put Allison back in. And I don't think Kelleher has the double and 34 in him. I think he's
Yeah,
out before then.
me too.
So that's kind of why I want to prioritize him over it. I just like his fixture better than Dubravka's against Spurs because, like I said, we're guaranteed to score. But the last time we had this conversation, we didn't score against Fulham, and Leno kept the clean sheet and got me all those points. So I'm
Right.
just kind of like, what do I do? Like, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at. Onana's got a decent fixture, right? Bournemouth at home, but again, they've been leaking goals left and right, so I'm not confident. So I
Yeah.
don't know if I need to go there or if I want the potential double from Petrovic, but we just went over all of that. So what would
Yeah.
you do in that situation?
I like what you outlined, which was bring in Garnacho. I think he's a great fifth mid. He's been a great fifth mid the whole season. I think the risk
Hmm.
there is very low. He is nailed on. He will likely be playing in the double game week. And the only thing you could consider is if you would rather have Gibbs White this week, maybe hold the Garnacho transfer and use, look at Robinson and look at the keeper. But it sounds like you need to downgrade to improve the keeper, which is where I think, yeah,
Yes, I
Garnacho
do need to do that.
is fine. And I
Yeah.
would probably go with Onana if I were you. And the reason being that Chelsea have already played the fixtures against the promoted teams. Like, I think that was where the value on Petrovic was. He didn't return, so he
Right.
didn't miss out on anything. But United still have. We said Sheffield on 34. You and I are going to free hit, but if I wasn't, obviously that's a great fixture. And then
Yeah.
Burnley, and then he's got, I think, a decent rest of the season there too. So I like what you outlined. Actually, I don't know if you were swayed at all with Van Hecke or Maguire or
Dallo
or
potentially. Yeah,
Dallo
Robinson to
this
Dallo.
week. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you should probably address the keeper because Kelleher's not going to play. To your point.
Yeah. And if Pope does come back by some miracle, then I have no keeper. So
Right.
I'd rather have, one at least. So that's probably why I'll prioritize the goalkeeper. But I still think there's merit to going from Sonny to Johnson to free up budget that way. It just seems like a lateral move.
Okay, I think that's insane. I just for the
I
record,
know,
that
I know, I
seems
know. But
insane.
listen, listen,
Yeah.
listen, listen. I I think Johnson will have more XGI than Sonny over the next 4 fixtures. So
Okay, I'm gonna clip that. We're gonna
you keep
revisit.
saying that we haven't clipped anything yet, so
We'll get there.
we'll get there. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. But the captain debate also plays into this too,
Yeah.
because I mean we already talked about Haaland, right? He's got the best fixture, but you've got Salah and Palmer who are really close second,
Yep.
and the decision on with Haaland even playing or even cameoing, I think Sonny's worth potentially a punt against
I
the
do
Leeds and
too.
Newcastle.
I
Yeah.
do too. I think Sun away. I mean, that could be like 4-3.
We've got a score to settle with Newcastle too, because they beat the shit out of us last year around this time. That sucked. I was driving home from a buddy's wedding and just listening to it goal after goal. So I hopefully they have that same fire in their belly as I do. So I do, yeah, Sonny. I may leave the captain's armband on Sonny and let the other two do their thing.
Yeah. Right now, mine's on Salah at home to
So
Palace. I could easily be
yeah,
swayed to Son, to Palmer, to Tony. I'm probably going to stay away from Haaland because of the
yeah.
rotation, risk that we just mentioned. But there's a lot of good options this week, and it's similar to the past few weeks. It's kind of been nice because early in the season it was kind of Haaland was the captain, and now I feel like each week
Hmm.
with the emergence of Palmer and Sun striker, there's kind of been like 4 or 5 options each week that I think has made it a
Yeah.
little bit more fun, personally, but also maddening.
They were all kind of even keel too. Everyone returning, just some getting the bones and some not. So I think the important thing though is just wait, right? See if we get any early news from the pressers Friday, Saturday morning. Pay attention to the leaks on Twitter. Don't make early transfers, right? There's still 3 or 4 days to go. We can still get some extra information on those injuries that we were talking about and the returns of some of these players. So I'm going to hold my transfers at least until Friday. I don't know
Yeah,
about you.
I agree, especially with the 8 Nori stuff.
Yeah.
I mentioned De Bruyne. I think De Bruyne is a captain shout. We don't have him in our teams, but
Sure,
if you
sure.
do
Yeah,
have
yeah,
him,
yeah.
like it's probably worth. But he's
Or
one you can
Foden,
wait on, or
same
Foden.
concept, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Foden probably not for me because of the knock he played midweek. But yeah, if he's starting, if you get a leak that he's playing, yeah, certainly he's a captaincy candidate as well. So all right, well, lots to consider this week, but I think this
Yeah.
was helpful. I have a much better idea of where my team is headed. Hopefully, you do as well. Next week is game week 34. We are both free hitting, so
Yep.
we'll kind of go through our free hit teams. I think we'll do the locks, the possibles, and the Nick Jackson. You could, but you shouldn't.
That's
Kind of
right.
like you mentioned earlier. So that'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, just keep an eye on the fixtures. I think that's the biggest thing is there's a big
Yep.
fixture pileup for a lot of these assets, including assets that you might want on free hits. So we'll have to be very closely locked in on that group to figure out who we want, who we don't want.
Yep.
Any last words from you?
Up the Spurs.
About the Spurs. All right. Well, I think that's all we got this week. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads at FPL_free hit pod. And again, join us next week as we talk game week 34 and potential free hit teams. Take care.